How could there be such strong superpowers? Introduction. Joining Tiance, newcomers can earn 20,000 yuan per month and pay 5 insurances and 1 fund. Then I'll join. At first, Chen Lusi just wanted to save enough money to buy a house through this job and see how the world of superpowers would unfold. But who would have thought that by doing so, he would become a secret weapon? Is this ability sequence still C? Why are your Tiance so strict? Chapter 1. Mountains. You are listening at unfold.Audio. Deep mountains and old forests, Qingming Festival. What can this evoke? Sweeping graves. If on this basis, an additional stone niche with strange stones is added, and a circle of red ropes is hung around it. It's probably not just about associating with tombs sweeping the terrifying atmosphere suddenly emerged. Chen Lusi stood in the center of the rugged stream, raised his hand, gestured for a photo, and then looked through the gap in the middle towards the nearby stone niche. The stone niche is located along the edge of the stream, which looks small and square. It is covered with stone slabs and supported by stone strips on both sides. And the central offering is a stone with a slightly strange shape, resembling a baby. Such a conspicuous artificial creation. Go up that naturally unsettling red rope. Anyone who looks at it must say it's authentic. However, in reality, this is just a mountain god stone niche, and even the person who built this niche is still living well now. A terrifying stone niche in the deep mountains. Simply put, it is the elderly version of handmade figurines created by the custom of stone worship. Think of this. Chen Lusi himself was amused by the saying that the elderly version is handmade. He put down his hand and took a few steps forward to the stone niche, then squatted down and bowed to the stone. I hope you can bless me with a smooth year ahead. No matter what, you can bless me with a smooth downhill journey. Chen Lusi himself does not believe in this. But as the saying goes, everyone has come. Most importantly, he got lost. Going up the mountain to sweep graves, but unable to find the way down the mountain. Until now, several cousins at the foot of the mountain are still teaching him how to go down. He is also a dead horse acting as a living horse doctor. However, after making a wish, Chen Lusi couldn't hold back any longer. After all, if we really want to fulfill our wishes, after worshipping so many ancestors, how could it be more useful than this inexplicably created mountain god? After all, it's still psychological comfort. What a fool. Chen Lusi looked at the strange stone, clapped his hands, and then stood up on his knee. But I don't know if the squat was too long, or if it was too urgent after intense exercise. Stand up. Chen Lusi felt as if he had been hit by a hammer behind his head. A huge dizziness suddenly struck, and his vision was instantly deprived. He immediately turned black in front of him, stumbled back a few steps, and almost sat down. Stumbling and struggling to stabilize one's figure. Chen Lusi quickly squatted down again, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. Until the feeling of dizziness gradually began to fade. He just opened his eyes again. But it seemed like there was a layer of fog in front of him, accompanied by residual dizziness, and he still couldn't see clearly. And as the sky and earth spun around, Chen Lusi noticed a scene that caused him to have a sudden cardiac arrest. Not far away. The shape of the stone in the middle of the niche is very strange, like a baby's stone, as if it has come to life. The part at the top that protrudes like a human head, leaning forward while laughing as if wanting to touch him. Moment Chen Lusi felt her heart stop beating. He was stunned for half a second, then closed his eyes again and vigorously rubbed his temples. Wait for him to open his eyes again. The dizziness disappeared. The layer of fog in front of me has also disappeared. The stone niche is still the same, and the stone is still the same. It didn't show a smile, nor did it move. Everything feels like an illusion when feeling dizzy. But, returning to the initial question, Qingming Festival, deep mountains and forests, terrifying stone niches. What can this evoke? Chen Lusi shifted his gaze away from the stone niche, slowly stood up, and then turned his head and walked away. Although he was willing to believe it was an illusion, being in the deep mountains, to be honest, it was still somewhat eerie. He didn't have the heart to explore and ponder why there was such an illusion, nor did he want to explore. He is more willing to tell this as a story to others in the future, rather than searching for answers in the deep mountains. In short, let's go down the mountain first. Chen Lusi walked briskly down the mountain along the stream. Walking briskly like flying. But as the distance from the stone niche grew further and further, the remaining astonishment and shock also faded away. After running wildly for a long distance, Chen Lusi's pace gradually slowed down. Because so far, nothing has happened. This made him even more convinced that what had just happened was an illusion. Scare yourself. Chen Lusi stopped completely, looked back at the location of the stone niche, and made a joke of himself with a smile. But the words have just finished. Suddenly, he realized something, the voices of several cousins seemed to have disappeared. Then go further. He found that the common chirping of insects and birds in the mountains and forests seemed to have disappeared. The whole mountain. As if losing vitality in an instant. Only the rustling sound of the gentle breeze brushing the leaves and branches remained. Chen Lusi's expression stiffened, and he slowly put away all the expressions on his face, not wanting to be stunned for a moment. He trotted straight up. But deep in the mountains and forests, there are really surprises everywhere. The sound of the wheels rolling over fallen leaves and crushing the soil suddenly rang out. The mountains and forests that had lost their vitality suddenly heard such vivid sounds, which immediately caught Chen Lusi's attention. He couldn't help but turn his head to the left while jogging. Then he saw a wheelchair. It was a very old-fashioned folding wheelchair, and the wheels looked a bit deformed. The steel pipes that served as the frame were covered in rust, and the leather seat cushion and backrest also showed signs of detachment. And at this moment it is slowly rolling down the slope, as if following Chen Lusi's footsteps. Chen Lusi looked at the wheelchair and fell silent. Suddenly, footsteps came from the right side. Chen Lusi slowly turned his head. A man in a suit and leather shoes, with his hands behind his back, was walking down calmly. Visually, they should be walking side by side with him. It looks very normal. If we ignore his exquisite suit and the old-fashioned pendulum clock that serves as the head, almost half a meter long. Chen Lusi took a deep breath, looked ahead, and made up his mind not to turn his head to look at any sound next. The strange noise came for the third time. Appearing next to him this time. Chen Lusi looked straight at him, even though the other person was walking briskly, he quickly caught up with him. He still chooses to pretend not to notice anything. There was a stalemate for more than 10 seconds. The sound of footsteps disappeared. And ahead, the familiar scenery came into view, and he was almost at the foot of the mountain. Chen Lusi couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, but his anger had not yet changed. Just slowed down. Straight ahead. A few meters away. A figure appeared abruptly in the center of the stream, like a ghost, and also like clouds and smoke. That is a girl. She stood in the center of the stream, wearing a thin pure white dress, standing quietly with an indescribable sense of emptiness and holiness. To put it another way. As if without substance, just like a female ghost. Chen Lusi saw the girl and her gradually slowing footsteps came to a complete stop. He stood more than 2 meters away from the other party, then bent down to support his knees, panting while thinking about countermeasures. The opponent didn't try to be mysterious, but instead scored a straight ball. It seems like I really can't escape. Think of this. Trembling, frightened, shocked, fearful, the various emotions generated by the strange experiences along the way disappeared one by one. Chen Lusi looked at his shoes and slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Then he slowly straightened up and looked at the girl standing in front of him, suggesting, although I don't understand why traditional ghosts are so punk. But if you want my dog's life, you can just click on it. There's no need for the scare part, it's really exhausting. You can make me feel like I'm walking on a flat road, then make me fall off a steep cliff with 1 foot, and arrange a sharp wooden stake or something at the bottom of the cliff, and it's all done. The girl not far away remained motionless. Chen Lusi waited patiently for a while, but still didn't respond. The other person didn't disappear or speak. He could only speak again and discuss, if you don't want my dog's life, then let me go. It's too embarrassing to die here, it feels like asking for it. If there's anything wrong on the mountain, I'll accompany you. The girl not far away finally had a reaction. She took a step forward. At this moment, Chen Lusi realized. The girl didn't wear shoes, and her snow-white and small bare feet stepped directly on the smooth and slippery stones in the stream. It makes people feel pain when they look at it. But the girl didn't seem to feel anything, and her fair and pretty face didn't have much expression. Upon closer inspection, this female ghost is quite beautiful. She took a step forward, then slowly lifted her hand, extended her fair finger, and pointed to the position behind Chen Lusi, at the top of the mountain. I just said something about the elderly version of the figurine. You don't want me to climb the mountain again, do you? Why don't you let me die now? Chen Lusi followed the other person's fingers and turned his head to look behind him. The burning sensation in his lungs after intense exercise made him clench his fist. My fist has hardened. But when he finishes speaking, turn around. There is no girl far away. Chen Lusi was stunned for a moment. The next second. The dizziness and brief sense of falling suddenly hit. The disappearing sound and anger reappeared. Including the impatient cries of my cousin at the foot of the mountain. Chen Lusi stumbled back a few steps again. Just came over. The sudden sound of machetes chopping made him feel invigorated. He turned his head suddenly. But the expected bizarre scene did not appear, instead several tower-like men appeared in his sight. Note the security military uniform on the opponent's body. Although Chen Lusi was surprised that they would appear here, he suddenly relaxed and searched for the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. And the other party obviously also noticed Chen Lusi. The leader glanced at Chen Lusi, put away the machete in his hand, and curiously asked, "Are you here to sweep the tomb?" "Yes." Chen Lusi instinctively responded. "Let's go down the road we drove. I just went up the mountain and saw someone shouting, 'Are you waiting for me?'" The other party nodded when they heard the exact answer, and then asked another question. "It should be." Chen Lusi responded and then climbed up the high slope of the stream to reach the other party. The other party signaled to others to make way down the mountain. "By the way, have you encountered anything strange?" Chen Lusi was just about to pass through the crowd when the leader thought of something and suddenly asked. Chen Lusi immediately stopped and opened his mouth, intending to say something. But when I saw the standard military uniform on the other party's body, I didn't dare to say anything. "What are you saying?" "Say you met someone with a clock head, a wheelchair, a girl in white, and a ghost that you don't even know about. Will the other person feel that they are insulting their intelligence with ghost stories?" "It's nothing." Finally. Chen Lusi shook his head and didn't say anything, just planning to go back and ask the elderly in the village. "Then you go down the mountain, be careful all the way." The leader didn't say much, just asked him to be careful. Chen Lusi nodded and was about to leave, but before leaving, he glanced at the few people who continued to lead the way and asked, "May I ask if this is?" Again. The leader was stunned at the words and then calmly replied, "It's to prevent wildfires." Chapter 2. Rain. You are listening at unfold.Audio. Next. Chen Lusi didn't encounter anything. I arrived at the foot of the mountain very smoothly. And his cousins were sitting in the shadows playing with their phones when they saw him come down. They reluctantly put away their impatience and welcomed him. Why so long? One of the cousins complained in his hometown dialect. Sorry. It's normal for them to have resentment after waiting for so long. After all, their ancestors of the same clan have already been worshipped. This time Chen Lusi went up the mountain. He was entrusted by someone to pay homage to people who had nothing to do with him. Chen Lusi was also aware of this, so he sincerely apologized. And when the other party sees him like this, it's not easy to continue saying anything. After all, although they were peers, Chen Lusi couldn't be considered sociable when he was young, so their relationship couldn't be considered familiar. In this situation, it's really hard to say anything heavy. Quickly, the other party shifted the topic. Chen Lusi hesitated for a moment before suddenly asking, by the way, cousin, did anyone else go up the mountain just now besides me? Yes, a team of security forces has gone up the mountain. It seems to be to prevent wildfires, my cousin replied casually. Is there a girl going up the mountain? Chen Lusi continued to ask. Do you count it? My cousin looked at Chen Lusi with a ponytail tied and asked in reverse. Chen Lusi was stunned for a moment, then smiled and shook his head, getting used to it. It seems that there is really a problem with the elderly version of the figurine. A few people embarked on the journey back together. In the end, Chen Lusi did not tell them about his experience in the mountains. After all, it's just like daydreaming. But upon careful consideration, it really feels like daydreaming. Chen Lusi finally turned his head to look at the gradually disappearing mountains and forests. Make up your mind. I won't come again in the future. If possible. At the same time. After watching Chen Lusi leave, the guard soldier hanging at the end of the team withdrew his gaze and suddenly looked at his companion, asking, did that young man just wear white clothes? Yes, what's going on? Another guard soldier nodded after losing consciousness for a moment. Oh. On the other side. The commander of the garrison did not notice the conversation. After hesitating for a moment, he took out his phone and made a call. The phone rang a few times and was quickly connected. Hello, Miss Xia. May I ask what ICE side says? The officer asked directly. IU. The woman on the other end of the phone had just started, but before she could speak, a slight strange noise rang. Then a male voice came out, very sunny, and said, Oldly, don't be afraid. There is absolutely no trace of the source code in your position, and all demons and monsters will be paperless in front of modern weapons. The commander of the garrison was taken aback for a moment, seeming somewhat surprised by IU personally answering the phone. However, he quickly reacted and hesitated, saying, that's what I said, but it's mainly Qingming festival, which is when most people are sweeping graves. I just met an ordinary person coming down from the mountain. From ancient times to the present, it has not been a significant place. Even if there is anything, it is probably at the level of rural legends. Kunlun patted his chest and used his head as a guarantee, and I don't think there will be much commotion. On the other end of the phone, IU added a moment and then paused, but I understand your concern. Alright, how about I come over later? Are you coming over? The commander of the security forces was clearly frightened. Well, there should be quite a few talented people in Tiance, right? There have been quite a few issues recently, and Qingming is a day of concentrated outbreaks, with not enough manpower. On the other end of the phone, IU explained a little, but didn't say much. Then the conversation changed and he smiled, that's it. I'll leave in about half an hour, and I'll probably be there in about an hour. Don't worry. The commander of the garrison did not say anything more upon hearing this, which was the best outcome. He said thank you and hung up the phone. Then, put away the phone. The commander of the garrison breathed a sigh of relief, took off the bag on his back, and took out the short protrusion inside. Unfold the gun stock, load the magazine, and open the safety. His overall temperament also changed. It looks like. It seems that it's not just about preventing wildfires. When Chen Lusi returned to the ancestral hall, dinner had already been served. Obviously. Chen Lusi and several cousins were the latest to return. The Chen family is considered a considerable clan in the local area, and there are many ancestors who need to be worshipped, so they go in groups every year. And the other two teams returned early, with high consumption, and had already started the game. And the place where they ate was right next to Chen's ancestral hall, where there was a grain drying field. The grain drying field is not small, elliptical, about 100 square meters, and the entire field is paved with cement. However, at this moment, there are no grains drying on it, but several round tables are placed on top. The entire Chen family, of all ages and genders, were sitting around different tables, enjoying themselves while chatting about their current situation. When Chen Lusi and several cousins returned, someone immediately welcomed them and asked them to sit down while asking why they came back so late. I mainly deal with Chen Lusi's several cousins. Chen Lusi himself is actually a bit of a social anxiety, although it may not affect his normal life, he is not very good at dealing with such situations. Elderly greetings are also answered, but they are a bit perfunctory. Simply put, it's all polite language without any genuine meaning. But who isn't it? Chen Lusi broke disposable chopsticks while looking around at the group of people who were chatting happily, and finally fixed his gaze on the several elderly people at the main table. He thought for a moment, picked up the bowl, and was about to get up to ask what was going on with the elderly version of the figurine they had created. But before he could move, his arm was pulled. "Cousin, you should like to play mobile games, right?" Chen Lusi turned around and found that it was his cousin, who was not very old, only 15 or 16 years old. It was probably because the child's table was not spacious enough that she sat over. Occasionally, Chen Lusi politely replied, although he was not familiar with the other party. "What do you like to play? Why don't you add a friend?" My cousin smiled sweetly at Chen Lusi. She has a good impression of this cousin. His personality is not to be underestimated, and he is also good-looking. His facial features are distinct and his features are three-dimensional. He has long hair in a ponytail, which not only does not damage his image, but also gives him a sense of handsome beauty. Stand out directly among the Chen family who have crooked melons and cracked dates per capita. Most importantly, he doesn't preach. So every year, she is very willing to chat with this cousin. "What are you playing with?" Chen Lusi had no choice but to find Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com and sit down. She had to deal with her cousin and planned to ask after dinner. My cousin was very excited and recounted the mobile game she had played. Chen Lusi occasionally responds with a sentence. Soon, the meal was finished. The whole process was very lively. The atmosphere is also good. After all, it's ancestor worship, and no matter what conflicts you have, you basically won't say them at this time. After lunch, the people began to disperse, and most of them went back to where they should go. The whole Qingming festival is actually just a morning gathering. Having enough wine and food marks the end of the annual ancestor worship activity. Chen Lusi also leaves after dinner every year. But this time he delayed a bit, mainly to ask the elderly what the mountain god really has. At this moment, although most young people should go back to where they should go. But a few elderly people didn't leave, they were gathering together to drink tea, smoke, and fart. Chen Lusi dismissed his cousin and slowly walked towards the main table. As the distance gets closer, several elderly people also noticed him and warmly called out to him. Chen Lusi greeted him with a smile and was about to shout uncle. Suddenly, a drop of rain fell on his head. Next up, the second drop, the third drop. Chen Lusi stopped and looked up at the sky. And not far away, one of the elderly people also noticed something and reached out his hand, shouting, "Rain, rain." He reached out to catch the rain while speaking. Continuing. He paused for a moment, very puzzled and said, "Why is this rain black?" Chen Lusi. Chapter 3. Cages. You are listening at unfold.Audio. Rain is black. Upon hearing these words, Chen Lusi immediately suspected that his uncle had dementia in old age. But after he reached out to catch a few drops of rain, he noticed that the rain did seem black. The continuously falling raindrops are as black as ink. But the tactile sensation is indeed water. It's very strange. However, now is obviously not the time to pay attention to these things. You should know that the place where you eat is in the grain drying field, with no roof over your head. Although I finished my meal and tidied up a lot of things one by one, no one expected it to suddenly rain on a sunny day. So there were still a lot of things to pack up. As the rain started to intensify, those who were still on the scene quickly mobilized and packed up their things together. Chen Lusi is also among them. However, everyone underestimated the urgency of the rain. From raindrops falling at the beginning to pouring down, it only took less than 2 minutes. Quickly, the people present had no time to pack anything and began to take shelter from the rain. Some went to the main house responsible for cooking during the Qingming festival, while others went to the ancestral hall. Chen Lusi ran to the ancestral hall, accompanied by the unknown little cousin, several uncles, and 2 cousins. Outside the ancestral hall, the whole world has been shrouded in rain. The originally clear sky was filled with overlapping dark clouds at some point. In an instant, the world seems to have changed into another picture. Black, unsettling rain, crazily falling from the sky into the earth. The lower, the more urgent. The lower, the more urgent. When countless black raindrops string together, countless lines form a rain curtain. The black rain curtain is reflected in the pupils of everyone in the temple. Everyone felt as if a black cloth was covering their eyes. Paired and stacked continuously, it finally feels like a dark cloud that can be reached. It's like everyone suddenly comes from reality into some abnormal space. I was just having dinner. The weather was quite good just now. It's just starting to rain. But why? This very strange scene left everyone in the temple stunned. Next up. Come to my senses. It's just nervousness and unease. Several uncles stared at the black rain outside the ancestral hall, reciting words. One of them jumped 3 feet high and rushed towards the ancestral hall where the ancestral tablet was enshrined, trembling as he lit a cigarette and worshipped his ancestors. Chen Lusi was also stunned. But soon he reacted and turned around, wanting to catch an uncle and ask about the mountain god. But as soon as he turned around, his arm was embraced. The little cousin, who didn't know her name, hugged his arm tightly, her face showing a look of fear, her eyes widened, and she said with a hint of tears, "Cousin, did someone pee in front of our ancestors' graves? Did retribution come?" Chen Lusi. How could someone have such a disconnected mindset? At the same time. Peak. The person in charge of the security forces stood at a high place, panting slightly as they watched a scene in the distance. Over here. The weather is clear and the blue sky is as clear as a wash. But not far away. The black rain, constantly accumulating dark clouds, was like an invisible veil, enveloping everything in front of them. Just like dividing the world into 2. To be honest. The scene of rain on one side and clear weather on the other is not uncommon. But such an exaggerated scene that makes people feel absurd at first glance is really abnormal. Plus the pitch black rain. The person in charge of the security forces had almost no hesitation and immediately took out his phone. Fortunately, there is still a signal. As soon as the phone was answered, he hurriedly said, "Ayu, my side doesn't seem to be at the level of a rural legend. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. I understand, I'll be right there. Okay, I will also try to get as close to the center as possible. The person in charge was also decisive, leaving a sentence before preparing to hang up the phone. But as soon as he took off the phone in his ear, something came to his mind. His face showed an angry expression and he said angrily, "By the way, please help me bring a message to Kunlun after the incident. Gan Lin Yang. You can also pat your chest to promise. Where is there any mountain god on the mountain?" Laughter came from the phone and answered. "Put away your phone." The person in charge took a deep breath and looked at the soldier next to him. "Is there a village over there?" "Yes." "Go down the mountain, pay attention to safety, and when encountering a lost possession, try to subdue it as much as possible. If unable to subdue it, open fire freely. But at the foot of the mountain, we have to do something. I will come, and what we need to do now is to try to control the scene as much as possible before he arrives." The person in charge glanced at the foot of the mountain, which was also shrouded in rain, took a deep breath, then picked up the short bump in his hand and walked down the mountain first. For Chen Lusi, going down the mountain is quite difficult. But for them, it's not difficult. But after truly stepping into the rain curtain that seemed to isolate another world, the person in charge still couldn't help but beat drums in their heart. Because even though it was only a few steps away, stepping into the rain curtain was like walking into a dark room with no lights or windows on, only a faint light shining through the gaps in the curtains. And the torrential rainstorm kept falling on the clothes, on the head and body, making life painful. Not to mention the strong noise emitted by countless raindrops falling. It makes people feel very uncomfortable both physically and mentally. Typhoon days are not that exaggerated, are they? The person in charge stood in the rain curtain, looked up slightly at the thick clouds that seemed to be within reach, and murmured, "So, what's going on this time?" Chen Lusi looked up at the clouds through the eaves of the ancestral hall. He can be said to have witnessed the disappearance of light with his own eyes. Watching the clouds getting thicker and the light decreasing. In the end, it's like being in the dark. Even if you shine a flashlight on your phone, you can only see up to 10 centimeters away. Although the uncles managed to calm down, they were clearly absent-minded when faced with Chen Lusi's inquiry, and one even got angry. And they are now gathering in the corner, including the disconnected little cousin, each holding a phone, either making calls or sending messages. This is also the only light source. A pitch-black ancestral hall. The light on the phone screen shines on everyone's face. This makes the already empty ancestral hall even more strange. Chen Lusi also wanted to stay in the corner and wait for the rain to stop, because reason told him that no matter how it rained, it would stop. But his experience on the mountain made him very uneasy, so he kept standing at the entrance of the temple, squinting his eyes and looking outside. He doesn't know what he's doing either. Probably, I want to find the source, or rather find the similarities between this rain and my experience on the mountain. Because it's really weird. But where can I see clearly? Chen Lusi lowered his head, and as soon as he finished speaking, he noticed a faint figure in the grain-drying field next to the ancestral hall where he had just eaten. Although the visibility was extremely low, Chen Lusi was convinced that there was indeed a figure there. It doesn't look high. I don't know if it's due to distance, like a child standing in the rain. And once you have such an idea, listen carefully, and the sound of rain seems to be accompanied by a hint of crying. But in general, this simply doesn't make sense. Even if it's a child, under such heavy rain, can we always hide? So Chen Lusi hesitated for half a second before moving his gaze away. But after looking away, the hallucinatory crying not only did not disappear, but became even clearer. And as time goes on, it gradually strengthens. At first, it was only a vague degree. But slowly, the crying became sharp, and in the end, it even covered the white noise falling from the pouring rain. Chen Lusi listened to the increasing cries and turned to look at several relatives whose eyes were nestled in the corner of the temple. Although they were still uneasy, their restlessness did not increase, nor did they shout or shout. I didn't seem to hear any crying. Chen Lusi sighed and listened to the intensified crying, then looked back at the heavy rain outside the temple. The petite figure still stood alone in place. Standing alone in the rain, it's like waiting for someone to come and save. To be honest, Chen Lusi regretted it. What ancestor did you say you came back to worship? He took a deep breath, regretting as he looked at the figure in the rain curtain and took a step outside. Less than half an hour. The accumulated water outside the ancestral hall has already reached the ankles. So as soon as he took a step, accompanied by splashes of water, Chen Lusi's shoes became completely wet. Immediately afterwards, all over the body was affected. The sudden rain hit my face, causing great pain. Cousin. Suddenly, a shout came from behind. The little cousin noticed Chen Lusi's actions and urgently called out to him. Chen Lusi heard the sound and stepped out with his other foot, standing still and turning his head to answer. But when I turned around, there was no ancestral hall behind me. Behind him was only a heavy rain curtain. Chen Lusi was stunned for a moment, then looked around. The surrounding ancestral halls, grain-drying fields, the figure, and even the sound of crying disappeared. He was left with only a thick rain curtain around him. Front, back, left, right. Only the rain curtain remains. It's like being in a cage. Chen Lusi wiped away the rain on her face, lowered her head, not regretting anything, but feeling a bit sore. You should know that you can encounter so many troubles both up and down the mountain, so you won't come back to worship your ancestors. Pop. Clear footsteps came. Just like someone stepping barefoot in the rain, the sound even drowned out the rain. Chen Lusi lifted his head. Ahead. In the heavy rain curtain. The girl in a white dress slowly walked towards him, and it was the one Chen Lusi met on the way down the mountain. Although the visibility around her was still very poor, there was a faint glow on the girl's body, even under the heavy rain curtain and such poor visibility. Chen Lusi can still see her clearly. Her expressionless and pretty face, her long black hair hanging down to her waist, her transparent white dress, and the thin and strange red knife in her hand. The rain seemed to intentionally bypass her. She arrived spotlessly at a distance of 1 meter from Chen Lusi and stood still. It forms a sharp contrast with Chen Lusi, who is like a drowned chicken. This is already considered torture. As for it, Chen Lusi wiped the water off her face again and couldn't help but ask. What kind of ghost is this? He just wants to ask a question. As for what? But the other party didn't pay attention to Chen Lusi, just facing him and slowly raised the thin and strange red long sword in their hand. Then, he grabbed the handle of the knife with both hands. The moment she grasped the handle of the knife, there was a strange noise coming from the wheelchair rolling. Starting from the girl, the invisible waves spread outward, and the world began to fade. The thin and strange red long sword in the girl's hand gradually lost its color. The whole world seems to be shrouded in a shadow. Only black, white, and gray are reflected in Chen Lusi's pupils. And the rain also stopped. Or more precisely, raindrops maintain their falling form and freeze in mid-air. Continuing. Click. A clear pendulum sound came. The raindrops frozen in mid-air began to recede upwards, not only the raindrops, but also the accumulated water under their feet, and even the water stains on Chen Lusi's body and head were gradually peeled off and restored to raindrops. All the water, like inverted, turns into raindrops falling from the sky and heads towards the sky. Then, Chen Lusi felt like there was someone else by his side. And as the young girl in front of her grasped the handle of the knife on her fair arm, her capillaries gradually appeared and her skin became transparent. She firmly grasped the handle of the knife and slowly lifted it up. Thank you. Her red lips parted slightly and she finally spoke. A soft and ethereal voice came. Chen Lusi opened her mouth and wanted to speak. But there is no chance anymore. A cold light suddenly appeared and flashed away. The girl's waist-long hair was dancing in the rain curtain, and a thin and strange long sword shattered the receding rain, falling on Chen Lusi. When Chen Lusi reacted, I only saw the girl's body leaning forward, and her long sword in her hand was continuously dripping blood droplets. He slowly lowered his head and glanced at his chest. The next second, blood suddenly gushed out. Spray forward crazily. Chen Lusi felt the whole world spinning around, stumbled back a step, and then fell back directly. Wow! A huge and beautiful splash of water splashed up, then turned into retrograde raindrops in mid-air. Chen Lusi lay in the stagnant water, watching the raindrops constantly receding, panting wildly due to intense pain. The line of sight began to blur. The girl came to his side, followed by a wheelchair, a man with a clock on his head, and an unknown ghostly figure. They silently watched Chen Lusi lying down, like a farewell ceremony. But Chen Lusi's vision became increasingly blurred, making it difficult to see them clearly. It seems like I'm really dying. It's really a comical way of dying. So what exactly is this? Is it really a ghost? No, it should be some kind of superpower unfolding, right? But I messed with who I recruited myself, riddle person, get out of here. Forget it, I'm going to die. Think about it, it's actually quite good. This should be like falling asleep. Not at a loss. At least don't worry about not being able to sleep. Unfortunately. It seems like it's gone too. Maybe those two sisters will be very sad. But not necessarily. If you are really sad, please apologize. This is also an unavoidable matter. After all, in life, accidents always happen. This is called a vivid lesson. Speaking of which, it really hurts and the eyelids are so heavy the blood gradually faded in the accumulated water. Chen Lusi's rapid breathing gradually slowed down, and his eyes became even more blurry when looking for the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com, almost unable to see anything clearly. The eyelids became incredibly heavy. He finally lifted his eyelids and glanced at the four monsters surrounding him. And it's like knowing that his life is not long. Under his gaze, the four monsters dissipated one by one. Wheelchairs, clocks, shadows. In the end, only the girl remained. She didn't rush to leave, but instead raised the knife in her hand and pressed the tip of it against Chen Lusi's eyes. Still repairing the knife, Chen Lusi struggled to move his gaze away and looked towards the sky still shrouded in thick cumulus clouds, with a faint smile on his pale and withered face. But the expected knife repair did not come. On the contrary, the thick cloud layer above his head slowly dissipated, creating a gap. A ray of sunlight filtered through the gaps in the clouds and suddenly fell down. Sprinkled on Chen Lusi's face. Just like a crack in the dark cage being opened. Chen Lusi stared at the dazzling sunlight, with a relieved smile on his face, and slowly closed his eyes. I hope you're not late. This seems a bit exaggerated. 2 kilometers away, a mid-range sedan stopped. The car door is pushed open. A tall man walked out and looked at the area shrouded in dark clouds in the distance. He scratched his head and said helplessly, "How much effort will it take? I hope we don't go so far as to shake people." Say it. He rubbed his shoulders, moved his body, and was about to walk forward. But the dark clouds in the distance suddenly began to dissipate visibly to the naked eye. So we found the host. The man paused, stopped his steps, and then reached out to touch his chin with interest. The atmosphere of Chapter 4 is so intense, but it hasn't died yet. You are listening at unfold.Audio. Dreams are a magical existence. When immersed in it, no matter how bizarre the content may be, one cannot perceive it as a dream. But after waking up, it's difficult to remember the details clearly. The dazzling sunlight shone on the face. Chen Lusi's eyelids twitched and he slowly opened his eyes. Just halfway through, he couldn't help but lift his hand and block the sunlight. It's too dazzling. He felt like he had just had a very, very long dream. But after waking up suddenly, I couldn't remember anything clearly. Not right. Chen Lusi gradually adapted to the sunlight, moved his hand that was blocking in front of him, looked at the azure sky, recalled for a moment, and suddenly sat up. Hi. Wake up. And just sat up. He heard a familiar voice and turned his head to see a simple and elegant white shirt, as well as an astonishing chest wrapped in the white shirt. Chen Lusi paused for a moment, then his gaze slowly shifted upwards. A beautiful and dignified face appeared in sight. With a natural affinity. Lin Ying lowered her head and looked at him, gently shaking the casually tied ponytail before chuckling and saying, "Don't you look for a little longer? How could you be here?" Chen Lusi ignored her and asked, lifting his clothes and looking down at his chest. "There are no wounds." "Not right. There is a scar. Extending from the right shoulder to the left abdomen. This means that what just happened is not a dream. But if it weren't a dream, the wound that almost cut him in half would now only leave a scar. How long have I been sleeping? Think of this." Chen Lusi looked up and said, "Have I slept for a long time? It should not be long." Lin Ying seemed to know what he was thinking. She raised her arm and showed him the old watch on her pure white wrist. At 3:40. Less than an hour has passed. After seeing the time clearly, Chen Lusi fell silent and lowered his head again to look at his chest. "What are you thinking?" "I was thinking, the atmosphere was so intense, but I didn't die, it's a bit awkward." Lin Ying lengthened her voice, lowered her head to look at Chen Lusi's profile, then pulled a high chair and sat down next to him, sighing, "I'm sorry, I didn't expect you to sweep the grave and cause trouble, and even get you involved. Have you gone to pay respects to your parents?" Chen Lusi instinctively replied, I helped my uncle and aunt clean up the weeds. Anyway, I did everything I needed to do." He went up the mountain precisely because he was entrusted by this person. But he soon realized something was wrong and turned his head curiously, asking, "What are you apologizing for?" "Actually, I didn't work at a foreign trade company and lied." Lin Ying's approachable fair face showed an apologetic expression. As she spoke, she lifted her hand and untied Chen Lusi's ponytail, tying his hair while flipping his head over to show him the other side. At this point, Chen Lusi only then noticed. On the other side, there was a group of people staring straight at him. And the leader is a tall man. Really tall, almost 2 meters tall by sight. Although his figure is not particularly robust, his height alone is very oppressive. And there was a girl standing beside him. Wearing simple casual pants and T-dot shirts, looking young, wearing a pair of round framed glasses, and having a pretty short hair that just covers the snow neck. It's quite beautiful. I don't know if it's because of the tall man next to me. She appears particularly petite. Of course, on the other hand, it can also be said that she sets off a man who is incredibly tall. And behind the two, there are still more than 10 people. They were wearing police uniforms, the same group of people that Chen Lusi met when he went down the mountain. But they are not as easy to talk about at the moment. Everyone is holding their guns. Staring at Chen Lusi on guard. "I thought you guys would have a long conversation." "Hello, my name is Xiaoyu, you can call me Yu." The tall man noticed Chen Lusi's gaze and lifted his head, revealing a sunny smile. It's like encountering like-minded friends while playing Wilderness, and it's natural to introduce oneself. "Ayu." Chen Lusi looked up at the sky. The axe of the knife, saw, axe, and axe. Forget it, as long as the pronunciation matches. Ayu explained, but he seemed to have encountered many of these things. Halfway through, he waved his hand and didn't continue to explain. Instead, he said, "Could you please tell me about what happened that day, especially your experience an hour ago, the strange things you encountered, and the specific process. In short, try to be more detailed. Is it really superpower development? Chen Lusi couldn't help but ask. You can consider it as a superpower deployment, and we will inform you of the specific situation later, but now. Ayu smiled and made a gesture of invitation, you should say it first. Beside him, the petite girl took out a thick notebook from somewhere and looked at Chen Lusi as well. Okay. Chen Lusi took a deep breath, and although he hadn't figured out the situation yet, he still planned to explain it to these seemingly professional people. When I was sweeping the tomb down the mountain, I encountered. Whose child is this from? But as soon as he started, he was interrupted by Lin Ning, who helped him tie his hair. Chen Lusi couldn't help but turn her head and froze in place. Not far away, a loli wearing a white long dress is slowly walking towards this side. She has a cute face carved in powder and jade, resembling a doll, with black and smooth long hair that almost reaches her ankles. Although his face remained expressionless. But anyone who sees it must say it's cute. Except for Chen Lusi. Although it has been completely reduced. Becoming a loli. But as Chen Lusi, who had just achieved a cesarean section with the other party, still recognized at a glance who this loli was. The girl who just cut herself. Ayu. The parties are here. Chen Lusi grabbed Lin Ning, who was about to get up and greet her, and then turned to look at the tall man who claimed to be Ayu. Oh. Ayu looked at Loli, who was walking non-stop, with some surprise. Others also cast their eyes at Loli, then turned their heads in unison, looking at Chen Lusi with suspicion. They don't believe it. Until the little girl approached Lin Ning and raised her hand to meet her as she was about to speak. She lifted her arm as if to stroke Lin Ying's face with her little hand. But the next second. Brush. A strand of green silk fluttered to the ground. Zhaozuiyuan.com, her small hand, devoid of any killing power, suddenly turned into a sharp blade that bloomed with cold energy. The blade directly brushed against Lin Ying's face and appeared in front of Chen Lusi. The little girl lifted her upper half, which was still her arm, but her lower half had turned into a slender and sharp arm, staring blankly at Lin Ning. Lin Ning seems to be blocking her way. Moment the crowd who had just suspected Chen Lusi, as if facing a great enemy, raised their guns and opened the safety. And the petite girl next to I reacted the fastest. The moment when the blade appears. Knife, her face changed and she immediately threw the notebook towards Ayu, then rushed towards the little girl's position like a shell. The strong wind swept up the corners of the clothes of Ayu and others. I didn't wait for Chen Lusi to react. The next moment. The petite girl appeared above the little girl and reached out to grab her little head. In the almost frozen time. The little girl's dark eyes moved slightly, glanced up, and then turned her gaze to Chen Lusi. Her body suddenly turned into a faint starlight, slowly sinking into Chen Lusi's body like smoke and dust. The petite girl in mid-air let go of her hand and flipped backwards, floating to the ground. Her gaze swept over Lin Ning, frowning slightly and looking at Chen Lusi. But Chen Lusi's body stiffened and suddenly let go of Lin Ying's hand. He jumped off the round table and raised his right arm. Brush. At the front end of the arm, a thin and long sharp blade suddenly appears. It's very strange. But it also carries a strange beauty. But Chen Lusi didn't care about any beauty, he widened his eyes and shouted directly. Lying down. My body started moving on its own. Chapter 5. Memory Misplacement. You are listening at unfold.Audio. You may not believe it when it comes to speaking. Surprisingly, the body can still possess self-awareness. Chen Lusi really didn't want to jump off. He was exhausted all day and didn't have time to lie down. Not to mention turning one's own hand into a blade. But the body started moving on its own, completely ignoring his commands. Although my thinking has not been affected. But at this moment, he is really similar to a vegetative person. The difference is probably that although his body does not obey his commands, he can still feel it. Just like a phantom limb. And precisely because of this situation, the scene of witnessing the flesh and blood on the front end of his right arm spread forward, gradually forming a thin and long blade, became even more terrifying. It feels too strange. The other people present didn't react much when they heard him shout. They just turned their gaze towards his arm. After examining his right arm, which had turned into a sharp blade, Chen Lusi turned to the petite girl who had initially rushed towards him, and his right leg slightly moved back. Next second, he bent down and headed straight for the petite girl. Although not as fast as a girl, according to Chen Lusi's own evaluation, she is much faster than a professional sprinter. Brush. In an instant, the blade came to the girl's neck. The girl leaned back and, as an ordinary person, could definitely bend her waist, narrowly avoiding the blade that was slashing horizontally. A sharp blade swept over her face, and a few strands of hair split in half in an instant. One hit missed. Chen Lusi flipped his arm and the blade changed from horizontal to vertical, facing away. The girl calmly turned her head away again, straightened her waist, and quietly looked at Chen Lusi. Chen Lusi, or more precisely, the controlled Chen Lusi, was not discouraged and launched another attack. The girl stepped back and calmly avoided Chen Lusi's repeated attacks, while watching him constantly launch attacks. She frowned and murmured, "Her arms have turned into knives, and the sharpness of the blades is beyond imagination. Ordinary people can't avoid them when they are caught off guard. Your level of danger is extremely high." There is a strong sense of dissatisfaction in the tone. "It's not me." Chen Lusi heard it and responded. Yes, his mouth is still his own. The only thing he can control throughout his body is his mouth. It seems that she still retains her consciousness, but her psychological condition is hard to say. The girl ignored her and continued to dodge the blade while muttering to herself. Chen Lusi. She seems to have a big opinion of herself. Hi handsome guy, are you still conscious? Can you still talk? At this moment, a you in the distance called out to him, "If possible, you can continue talking." In this situation, Chen Lusi couldn't turn his head, he could only reply with his back to the other person. Ayu replied, "Yes, this can also help me better evaluate your situation. Don't worry, we will definitely subdue you." Line. Chen Lusi was panting slightly. Although he couldn't control his body, the feeling of exhaustion and asthma was all his. With this chopping and chopping, his lungs burned again. He persevered and panted as he began to recount his experiences for the day. "I went down the mountain while sweeping the tomb. I got lost. And on the way, I met a stone niche dedicated to the mountain god. The stone was laughing. I chose to leave immediately. Then all the way down the mountain, I didn't encounter any other strange things, but just as I was about to reach the foot of the mountain, I suddenly met a girl wearing a white dress. Then I realized it, and the person disappeared. I saw everyone in the security forces." Ayu turned around and glanced at the person in charge of the nearby security forces. "Yes, I thought he was an ordinary grave sweeper, so I didn't ask much," the person in charge nodded. "Okay, I understand. What's next?" I looked back at Chen Lusi, who was still chopping people. Then, I came back to eat. At first, it was normal. But suddenly it rained. Black rain. The rain grew heavier and heavier. I hid in the Chen family ancestral hall. Inexplicably, I saw figures and crying in the rain. The crying grew louder and louder, and I felt like I couldn't continue like this, so I walked out. As soon as I walked out, the temple disappeared, and I stood in the rain curtain. Then the girl in a white dress appeared again, silently and inexplicably stabbed me. Next, I lost consciousness. You all know what I woke up to. The girl turned into a loli and is now controlling me to chop people. A girl wearing a white dress, black rain. After feeling his chin for a moment of hesitation, Yu asked again, is there nothing else in the rain except for the girl in the white dress? To be honest, it's already enough. Chen Lusi let out a bitter smile and gasped for breath, saying, a few more. I guess I won't have been cut off. I'll be able to hang around like a human. It makes sense. Yu smiled and then looked around, but it always feels a bit out of place. The single legend of this place, theoretically speaking, wouldn't have such a big battle. Can it be a legend traced back to the source code? The person in charge of the security forces thought for a moment and asked a question. If it were this kind of existence, the level of danger would not be so low, and I wouldn't have time to chat with you. Although I don't deny the possibility of misplaced power, it's not quite like that. How could it be so simple and rough to directly turn into a knife and strike someone? Yu smiled and said, besides, even if Kunlun is not reliable, it shouldn't be all wrong. They can get anything wrong, the head of the security forces said with a stern expression. Truly worthy of being our good brothers in the Tiance mansion. Yu patted his shoulder and said, speaking is just pleasing to the ear. The person in charge of the security forces did not respond, but looked back at Chen Lusi, who was chopping people, and asked, what should we do now? Lend me a gun. Yu thought for a moment and reached out his hand. The head of the security forces handed over the short bump in his hand without saying a word. Not at all. Yu glanced at Lin Ying standing quietly not far away and looked at her. Helplessly, she said, this is Lin Ying's acquaintance. I finally found a person with spiritual abilities. I don't want them to leave the burden on me and borrow people from all over. Lao Li, you don't want to go back. Your wife doesn't know you, but instead thinks you're a family dog bringing you a bowl of dog food, right? A pistol, just a pistol. The person in charge twitched at the corner of their eye, retracted their short protrusions, pulled out the pistol from their waist and handed it over. Yu took the gun, slightly weighed it, then lifted the muzzle and aimed it at Chen Lusi's head, which was constantly moving and swaying. Then, the muzzle slowly moved down and aimed at the side abdomen. This position should avoid the main organs, so there shouldn't be any problem. Yu exerted force on his index finger and pulled the trigger directly. Bang! Smoke slowly spewed out from the muzzle, accompanied by tiny sparks. The bullet was spinning in the barrel, flying out from the muzzle along the rifling, tearing through the air and flying towards Chen Lusi. Chen Lusi, who was originally tirelessly chopping people, suddenly stopped abruptly when the trigger was pulled, turned around, and swung his left arm back forcefully. A cold light suddenly appeared. Like in frozen time. The bullets and thin blades in mid-air collided precisely. Sparks burst forth. The bullet split in half along the thin blade. Next up. Zhaozhuyuan.com dang. Click. The waves blew up Chen Lusi's hair. Two voices came through. The former is the sound of bullets hitting iron objects. The latter comes from Chen Lusi's arm. Hiss, he showed a painful expression and took a deep breath. I dislocated. Yu handed the gun back to the person in charge and shook his head with a smile, saying, you must have dislocated it. The other hand can also change, and the level of danger is even higher. On the other side. The petite girl seized the opportunity and instantly came behind Chen Lusi, gritting her teeth and saying this sentence. Without waiting for Chen Lusi to react. She struck Chen Lusi's back of the head with a powerful and heavy hand knife. Chen Lusi's eyes darkened and he instantly lost consciousness, limping backwards. At the same time, both arms quickly returned to normal. And the petite girl is a master who manages to kill without burying. After knocking Chen Lusi unconscious, although she caught him, she only helped him connect his dislocated shoulder, then pushed forward and turned his head before walking away. Lin Ying had already stepped forward and quickly took a few steps, reaching out to catch Chen Lusi. However, an adult male seems too heavy for her. Although she caught Chen Lusi, she couldn't stop and instead knelt down on the ground. The petite girl turned around and left, but suddenly felt a chill behind her. She turned her head in confusion and looked at Lin Ying, who was holding on to Chen Lusi. Curiously, she asked, "Lin Ying, what's wrong?" "It's nothing." Lin Ying knelt down on the ground, letting Chen Lusi lean against her arms, and then showed her a bright smile. Like a flower. Chapter 6. See, thanks to Lingxiao, the last leader of the alliance. You are listening at unfold.Audio. Boyfriend. At this point, Ayu also walked over and looked down at Chen Lusi, who was lying on Lin Ying's body, and asked straightforwardly. Lin Ying withdrew her gaze from the petite girl and shook her head. Okay. You didn't care and turned to ask, by the way, should we try to let him join my team? Lin Ying frowned slightly upon hearing the words, as if hesitating. Don't worry, even if those old people who want to live forever don't like me, they won't involve the lower-level personnel, and I'm still living well. You seemed to know her concern and smiled, saying, I quite like this guy. That's probably just eye contact. Besides, the power he displayed is not suitable for free range. If it doesn't work, he can quit in 6 months. Okay, Lin Ying thought carefully and glanced at Chen Lusi before finally nodding and agreeing. That's settled. But we need to confirm the sequence first. You looked at the petite girl not far away and smiled, Xia Panqiu, big niece, let's do some work. As he spoke, he threw the notebook that the girl had just thrown to him. Then, he took out a yellowed, old-looking brown paper from somewhere and gently shook it. I've been working. The girl named Xia Panqiu took the notebook and complained, then reluctantly said, You tell me. Chen Lusi. Dangerous sequence, C. Ability sequence, C. Importance, low, Tiance Mansion's third team's special move. Well, let's report it to Kunlun like this. As I summarized, he picked up the brown paper and looked at Chen Lusi. Next second. As if being moved by something, faint blue dots emerged from Chen Lusi's body and slowly condensed into lines, beginning to slowly converge towards the paper. On the other side, Xia Panqiu quickly wrote I's summary and evaluation on her notebook. Then, she lifted her head and said seriously, I have no objections to the rest, but I think the danger sequence needs to be raised to A. His ability to change blades is too dangerous for ordinary people. Also, I don't think it's a good idea to let him join Tiance. See, you didn't miss it just now. After chopping a bullet, your arm dislocated. Although it can barely deal with modern weapons, it may not be possible to switch to fully automatic weapons. You smiled and said, it has a certain level of killing power, but it can be dealt with modern weapons. Judging from any standard, C's evaluation is not a problem. As for joining Tiance, don't you think it's dangerous to let him join Tiance? But there are still issues with your standards. Upon hearing this, Xia Panqiu did not dwell on the fact that the other party had joined Tiance. However, regarding the sequence, she still insisted on her own opinion. Moreover, if you judge, 99% of the people are C and D, and you cannot do it accurately. Listen to me, no problem. Ayu waved his hand. I persist like this. Xia Panqiu remained steadfast. AAA, everything is A. When encountering a dog, you have to say, for the level of danger. You looked at his stubborn niece in front of him and couldn't help but say, is your resentment towards your chest so deep? Xia Panqiu's fair face instantly turned red. He rolled up his notebook and threw it forcefully towards Ayu's face, saying, You go die. I reached out to grab the notebook steadily and shook his head with a smile, just report it like this. This person may become your teammate in the future. Don't be too harsh on others. Although everyone's situation is different, Chen Lusi clearly doesn't want to become like this ghost. I'm not criticizing others, I'm just worried. Don't forget Lu Hao. Xia Punxiu pursed her lips, calmed down, and whispered, and his ending. You probably don't want a second Lu Hao to appear. After a pause, he looked at Chen Lusi in Lin Ying's arms and continued, moreover, he is very wrong. No one can be so calm after being chopped off. I suspect he has a psychological problem. Either he is mentally abnormal or extremely pessimistic, which is also an unstable factor. Upon hearing this, Lin Ying lifted her head slightly again. Lu Hao is an exception. Don't look at others with colored glasses, it's not fair. As for psychological issues, it's normal for everyone to face so much pressure in their lives now. You threw the notebook back to her and said, and if you think it's abnormal, then go persuade him and change him. What's the use of saying this here? Xia Punxiu reached out to grab the notebook again, unable to refute it, and could only say. Then at least you can see which category his authority belongs to and what it is called, and then make a judgment. Okay. I helplessly picked up the brown paper in his hand and glanced at it. How is it? Xia Punxiu asked. Yu looked at the paper without answering, but showed a thoughtful expression. Xia Punxiu said impatiently, hey. The third category. I regained his senses, folded the brown paper, and casually stuffed it into his pocket. As for what it's called, you can ask me. I happen to get familiar with it, but it's not called Control Blade, he said, you don't have to follow anymore. If you really need to worry, just take Chen Lusi home and observe, while explaining the situation to others. You also enjoy this kind of work, don't you? I've saved up a lot of people waiting for explanations during this time, and it happens to be together. If you still feel uncomfortable after working together for a while, then let's talk about it. Xia Punxiu looked down at Chen Lusi with a thoughtful expression on her small face. After a long time, she murmured, observe. Okay, I'll take him back. Lin Ying, Chen Lusi shouldn't be living here, right? Give Pan Qiu the address and let her take someone back. As the host, it's best not to stay in the same place. You looked at Lin Ying and said, besides, let's leave the person to Pan Qiu. There are a bunch of ordinary people waiting for you to hypnotize over there. This battle is too big, and there are also many people who have experienced it firsthand. Some of them are busy. Lin Ying thought for a moment, but she didn't object. Yu turned his head and said, oldly, you should also screen and see if there are any other awakened ones. The person in charge of the security forces nodded and said, okay, what about you? I'll go up the mountain to see the stone niche in Chen Lusi's mouth, and then I'll go to the next place. Yu stretched lazily and said, I don't know when I can go back and rest. The head of the security forces automatically ignored the second half of the sentence and curiously asked, do you think there's a problem with that stone niche? No, just curious to see. Yu looked into the distance and smiled. Everything that happens next. Chen Lusi doesn't know anything about it. During this period, he woke up once, but before he could see the surroundings clearly, he felt another pain in his neck and passed out. And when he wakes up again, he found himself lying in the rented house. And it's already evening. Chen Lusi endured a headache and sat up from the bed, rubbing her temples. At this moment, he realized that he hadn't even taken off his shoes. He looked at his feet resting on the bed and recalled for a moment. Memories of the day surge. Zhaozhuyuan.com. He couldn't help but lift his hand and looked carefully. It was a normal hand. Dreams. Impossible. As soon as the idea arose, Chen Lusi shook his head. He got up from the bed, walked around to the door, turned on the light, and then lifted his clothes to look at his abdomen. That scar is still there. Prove that everything during the day is not a dream. As for how to get back to renting, Chen Lusi looked around and soon noticed the note on the table. He walked over and picked it up to take a look. Call me in case of any abnormal situation, no harm, no boasting, and no active use of power. I'm just looking at you, taking care of myself. 3 days later, at 12 o'clock, come to the top floor of Pengcheng Jingyuan building. Summer looks forward to autumn. Attached are detailed addresses and phone numbers. Chen Lusi looked at the note in his hand and fell silent for a moment before muttering to himself, in 3 days, will we start counting from today or tomorrow? Is it so imprecise? It's difficult to write dates. He just finished speaking. The phone in my pocket suddenly vibrated. Chen Lusi took out his phone. At first, he felt a bit strange that the phone could still be used after soaking in heavy rain for so long, but soon he realized that waterproofing has become one of the selling points of phones recently, so he forgot about this issue. Lowering his head, he woke up his phone and glanced at it. New information. From Xia Punqiu. Starting from today. Chen Lusi slowly shifted his gaze away from his phone, glanced at the balcony, then dropped the note and went straight to the bedside, leaning back and looking at the ceiling, murmuring, "It's really scary." Chapter 7. Why are you just watching? You are listening at unfold.Audio. After sighing, pick up your phone again. Chen Lusi only then noticed that Lin Ying had also sent a message. She said a lot and apologized for asking him to go back to sweep the grave this time, while explaining the reason why he would be renting a house. He also said that his younger sister is about to take the college entrance examination and hopes that he can accompany her to have a meal and cheer her on. They are all trivial matters. As for the rest, she said we'll talk about it when she comes back. Chen Lusi looked through it in its entirety, gave an okay expression, then dropped his phone and looked back at the ceiling. He is recalling the experience of that day. But soon Chen Lusi realized that there was nothing to remember. Because he didn't know what he had encountered, thinking about it was in vain. He got up from the bed, forgot about the related matter, and decided not to think about it. Let's wait for an explanation. He lived for 25 years, always living in a daze with many things he couldn't understand. But after living for so long, there is still experience, and that is. Accidents always happen in life. No matter how difficult the obstacle may be, even though it may seem like the sky has collapsed at the time, as long as time is extended enough, it can always be overcome. The same thing happened this time. He thought he was going to die when he was chopped down, but now he is still alive and not at a loss. Who knows if they will die suddenly again in a few days. So anything is fine. Chen Lusi stood up from the bed, moved his body for a while, then went to the balcony to collect the clothes for washing and walked into the bathroom. I took a good bath. Chen Lusi wiped her hair and walked out, changed into clean clothes, and then picked up her phone to order takeout. Then, he hummed softly and returned to the bathroom. Standing in front of the mirror, he applied a layer of shaving cream to his chin and picked up a razor. Ready to tidy up the beard that had become prominent these past few days. Electric shavers are convenient, but Chen Lusi thinks that life requires a sense of ceremony, and he thinks manual shaving is very relaxing, so he has never bought an electric one. This can also be considered a unique way for him to relax. The blade of the razor slowly shaved his chin, and the foam disappeared with his beard. Chen Lusi lifted her head and looked at the mirror, her face just showing a smile. Next second, it froze. Because he was not the only figure reflected in the mirror. At the entrance of the bathroom, Loli, dressed in a white dress, stood quietly there, looking up at him without moving. Chen Lusi doesn't know when she will appear there. Anyway, when he noticed the other person, they were already standing there. He slowly turned his head and looked at the door with a razor in his hand. He hesitated and asked, "Is there anything wrong?" The other party does not respond. Just looking up and staring at him with dark eyes. Chen Lusi took a deep breath, turned his head, shaved his beard first, and then washed off any remaining shaving cream. He bypassed Loli at the door, left a sentence, "You can do it yourself," and walked out of the bathroom. Pick up your phone. Make a phone call. Hello. Miss Xia, isn't she? Chen Lusi pressed the fire and, out of caution, asked first. Yes, what's up? A crisp voice came from the other end of the phone. Here we go again, the girl who manipulated me to chop you down is standing right outside my bathroom door. As Chen Lusi spoke, he leaned back and glanced at the bathroom, only to find that the other person was still standing there, no longer looking towards the bathroom, but towards the place where Chen Lusi was standing at the moment. The two of them glanced at each other again. Chen Lusi withdrew his gaze and continued, "Can you help solve this? Take her away or something like that." "Cannot." Xia Punchio replied decisively. "Can we make her disappear?" Chen Lusi asked again. "No, he will disappear in the future, but he won't disappear in the short term," Xia Punchio replied decisively again. Chen Lusi. Does she have any intention of harming you? At this moment, Xia Punchio asked in reverse. Not yet. Does she have any intention of manipulating you to go out and chop someone else? Not yet. Did she take any action beyond common sense? Not yet. He's just watching. Xia Punchio asked 3 questions in a row and received no response. After summarizing, she said, "Let's just let it go. When she doesn't exist, what should she do? You're lucky, at least she's following a normal human-like body, or a child without any pressure. Don't worry, most people can't see her, you can live with peace of mind." Miss Xia. Chen Lusi took a deep breath and said expressionlessly, "I can rent with someone, but I still choose to live alone. Do you know why?" "Why?" Xia Punchio asked with great dignity. "Because of freedom, because I can live at my own pace completely. As an unmarried, childless, single man for many years, you suddenly told me that I want to live with a bare child. I can't accept it." Chen Lusi blushed and said, "This is even more uncomfortable than killing me. What's the difference between this and sharing the rent? The other party can't help share the rent yet. Is there really no solution?" "No." Xia Punchio cut off the railway and said, "And as I have said, you can treat him as non-existent, or even not as human. I don't think a shadow-like presence can affect your normal life, making the freedom you speak of disappear. Perhaps it takes some adaptation period, but I don't think that's a problem. Do you think a normal adult male would walk out of the bathroom without wearing clothes after taking a shower, knowing that there is a humanoid body in the room? This is also a part of freedom, and now this part of freedom is gone. There's nothing more to say, right?" "Sure enough." Finally, Xia Punchio spoke up and gritted her teeth, saying, "Okay, you can do this. Shadow. Just treat her like a shadow. That's it. Say it." I hung up the phone directly. "What?" Chen Lusi took off the phone in her ear, with question marks all over her head. "Do I need your permission? I am reasoning with you. Seeking solutions. What are you talking about?" Chen Lusi looked at her phone and wanted to call back, but recalled the other person's resolute attitude. In the end, it was abandoned. The solution should be none. Can only rely on the other party to disappear on their own. And now he doesn't even know what the other person is. Let's wait for another 2 days. Drop your phone. Chen Lusi gathered up her still wet long hair and was considering what to do next. The knocking on the door rang first. "The delivery has arrived." Chen Lusi walked towards the door, opened the door to take the takeout, said thank you, and returned to the living room with the takeout. The house he rented is not large, with 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and 1 balcony, connected to each other, similar to an apartment. The so-called living room is actually a bedroom. If two people's lives are definitely cramped, but one person's life is more than enough. As a single dog, furniture is definitely not necessary. The only table in the entire room besides the bed is a long table placed near the balcony. This is not only his dining table, but also a computer table, game table, and yuan.com, serving all living scenes that require a table. And most of the time, he stays there. Move the keyboard handle aside to make room for takeout. Chen Lusi opened his chair and just sat down. He noticed the little girl at the bathroom door walking towards him silently. There is really no sound at all. Perhaps it's because I didn't wear shoes. Chen Lusi looked down at her snow-white bare feet under her white skirt. The little girl walked up to him, stood still, and remained silent. It's just like a shadow. Chen Lusi could only treat her as a shadow, untie the takeout bag, take out the pork chops and egg rice she ordered, and prepare to eat. But he still underestimated the pressure of standing next to a loli. She stood motionless by her side, watching quietly. At first, she was looking at Chen Lusi, but after Chen Lusi opened the delivery lid, she turned her gaze to the crispy and golden pork chops. Chen Lusi held chopsticks and noticed the other person's gaze, unable to take them down. He let out a long sigh and obediently picked up a piece of pork chop. Don't look at me, it makes me look like I'm abusing children. Can you either eat together or go play on the side? Chen Lusi handed a piece of pork chop to her mouth and said in a deliberative tone. The little girl didn't move or have any intention of eating, just looked up at him. Chen Lusi held up the pork chops. For a long time. But the other party never responded. He couldn't bear it anymore, stuffed the pork chops into his mouth, and lowered his head to start eating. Forget it. Just watch it. And next. Little Loli watched from the side the whole time. Chapter 8. Baby likes sleep, thanks to the leader of HHHZZ VI, Das. You are listening at unfold.Audio. Next. Chen Lusi made another effort and even asked the little girl's name several times. But the other party seems really unable to communicate. He can only consider the other person as a shadow. To some extent, the other person is really like a shadow, always following him, whether it's eating, going to the bathroom, or sleeping. Fortunately, although the other party may approach him coldly and look at him, behaviors such as using the restroom, as long as the door is closed, the other party will not forcefully open the door and look at him. Otherwise, he would have to kneel down to the other person. As for sleeping, she will stand silently on the side. But as long as you sleep on your side, you can pretend that the other person doesn't exist. He can only do this. At midnight. Chen Lusi looked sideways at the wall, although he couldn't see the other person, he could still feel their gaze. This makes Chen Lusi, who already has sleep disorders, even more unable to sleep. He could only wake up his phone and watch the short videos without much nutrition over and over again. Time slowly passes by. It will be 1 o'clock in the morning soon. Chen Lusi rolled over a bit tired and was startled. The little girl still stood by the bed. Chen Lusi slowed down and shifted his gaze away from the phone screen, looking at Loli standing quietly in the darkness. He said helplessly, "Don't you need to sleep?" No response. "Can you let me sleep?" Chen Lusi continued. He still holds no hope. But this time, there has really been a reaction. The little girl in a white dress slowly lifted her hand and covered Chen Lusi's forehead. The icy and cool touch came. Chen Lusi opened her mouth and was about to speak. The little girl silently said something. Moment Chen Lusi's consciousness collapsed and he fell asleep to death. The next day. 10 o'clock in the morning. Chen Lusi opened her eyes and picked up her phone to take a look at the time. Then, she briefly recalled what happened last night. He stood up and began searching for the figure of the little girl. The room is just so big. I found it quickly. She didn't stand by the bed this time, but sat quietly in front of the computer, staring at the pitch-black screen. Chen Lusi got up from the bed and came to her side. The little girl slowly turned her head, her dark eyes fixed on him. Chen Lusi squatted down, carefully holding her small hand resting on her knee, and then said with a firm face, "From now on, you are my most important family, humanoid sleeping pills." As expected, there was no response. But Chen Lusi doesn't mind either. He has a little crush on this little loli now. Not for anything else. Just because of her hand, she fell asleep instantly. This is the truly coveted superpower. Let's have more people. Anyway, the other party doesn't eat or drink, and there's no need to sleep. Just like a shadow. Although it may be a bit inconvenient, on the contrary, he can enjoy a baby-like sleep. This is really amazing. And according to Xia Panxiu, the other party will also disappear. You can enjoy a period of baby-like sleep without being responsible, such as raising the other person. This is really amazing. When Chen Lusi sighed, Xiaoyulai kept watching her quietly, just like a delicate doll. Until Chen Lusi let go of her hand, she stood up from the chair and continued to look. After the excitement subsided. Although Chen Lusi still feels a bit uncomfortable, her mood has changed from yesterday. Suppress the discomfort of being watched. What should he do now? Wash up, have breakfast, and then code. He doesn't have a serious job, to put it nicely, he's called a freelancer, to put it bluntly, he's a jobless wanderer. In order to survive, he needs a job that can provide him with money. And he is decadent, not good at socializing, not fond of going out, good at brainstorming, perfectly fitting the image of an online writer in his own impression. And then he became an internet writer, of course. This is a joke. The process of choosing to stay at home is actually very complicated, which can be summarized as being fired, unable to find a new job, and being a dead horse acting as a living horse doctor. And his description of the image of online writers is entirely based on his clear understanding of himself. Because he doesn't know the second online writer either. In short, this is the result. He relied on this plan to survive smoothly. Although he didn't live very well, as a person with low material needs, maintaining a simple survival was very satisfying. There is no demand for cars, houses, wives, or other oversized items yet. Actually, no matter how bad life is, it can't be any worse. He even has savings, although only a few tens of thousands of yuan, they are already very good. Anyway, Chen Lusi is quite satisfied with the current situation. In addition, after each book is completed, he can also choose the length of his vacation independently, which is the most important. Although there may be negative effects such as anxiety during this period, overall, he does need to be more free. He is currently on a self-determined vacation and preparing to conceive the next book. The idea for the new book was finalized last night while taking a shower. Because of his experience in Go Home, he plans to write a supernatural novel. The name is tentatively set to Sweep the Tomb and Create a Future. Throughout the morning, Chen Lusi sat in front of the computer and had lunch, barely taking a break, before continuing to work on the outline. And little Loli always stood by the chair, looking at the screen without feeling bored. After 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Chen Lusi finally closed the document and turned on the host next to the monitor. Although he has low material needs, his spiritual needs are quite high. Several major game consoles have been purchased. I also bought a lot of games. After working for nearly 7 hours, Chen Lusi felt that it was time for him to touch the fish. This should be more interesting than reading documents. Chen Lusi picked up the game controller, opened the game, and turned his head to look at Loli standing next to him. He muttered to himself, although I don't know if the game delivered by courier looks interesting, the game is still a game. No response received. Chen Lusi didn't mind either and opened the archive from the day before yesterday, continuing her delivery journey. And currently, his game progress is approaching the end. So, compared to the earlier stage, the difficulty is much higher. He has made quite a few embarrassing mistakes as he is still addicted to food and people. However, little Loli never had any reaction. Finally, half an hour later, Chen Lusi finally managed to avoid a group of BTs, crossed the snowy mountain ravaged by a blizzard, and arrived at the spiritual cultivator base. While Chen Lusi breathed a sigh of relief, he tilted his head slightly and boasted, "You're amazing, aren't you?" The little girl who had been staring at the screen slowly turned her head, her pitch-black eyes fixed on Chen Lusi. "The failures were not my problem." Chen Lusi smiled and said, "You don't know how anti-common sense this game is. If you play enough games, you know it's really different from regular games. Simply holding the controller throughout the entire process to control the character and prevent it from becoming imbalanced is enough to go against common sense, but playing it can be quite tiring. The goods will be delivered next, and it will definitely be much easier to go down the mountain. If you don't believe it, wait and see." Upon hearing this, Xiaoyulai turned her head and looked back at the screen. But Chen Lusi's descent from the mountain was not easy either. "I have died many times at the foot of the mountain. At least the song sounds good, isn't it?" Chen Lusi forced a smile. The little girl beside her didn't turn back this time, just stared at the screen without moving. "Do you want to play?" Chen Lusi hesitated for a moment and handed over the handle. Although it means treating the other person as a shadow. But in reality, an existence that is like a human being in every way, still inevitably leads people to view it as a human being. But the other party is not human after all. From beginning to end, the little girl did not reach out to take the handle. Chen Lusi saw her motionless, shook her head, and no longer persisted. "Once again, I told myself that the other person was not human, so I continued my gaming journey. But soon, he broke his credit. The vast snowy mountains and magnificent scenery make the protagonist walk alone and with difficulty. The ethereal music suddenly sounded. Pretty good, right?" Chen Lusi turned his head again and muttered to himself, "At first I couldn't even imagine that the gameplay of this game would be fun. But after getting started, surprisingly, it was quite interesting. Although I scolded my mother many times during this period, especially the part in front of the wind power plant. But I never thought about deleting the game. Actually, there was a more outrageous one before, which was to travel across the entire continent with one's back. Look, I'm coming down, isn't it awesome?" Next. Chen Lusi is playing games and occasionally sighs, but without a response. It is difficult to distinguish whether he is talking to himself or talking to the little girl next to him. And the little girl also stood quietly, never moving from beginning to end. One speaks, one listens. This situation persisted until evening. Even the next afternoon. Chen Lusi's life can be described as boring. There is basically no difference between the first day and the second day. Even after such a big event in Go Home, he still lived according to his own rules. The next day, in the evening, Xia Panxiu looked at the figure playing games on the screen and said helplessly, "How could there be such a boring person? Even though I repeatedly insists that Chen Lusi's power is not in high danger sequence. But until now, she still holds opposing views. So she made a lot of preparations. But she didn't expect that all these preparations were not used. I couldn't even utter the warning that she had prepared her stomach draft. Because of the pressure on the screen, I have been staying in the room all along, except for coding and playing games." Not only did he not try to turn his arm into a blade again. Even they started chatting about games with someone who couldn't communicate. Also trying to feed the other party. What a lunatic. Although the camera cannot see that person. But Xia Panxiu didn't think that Chen Lusi was talking to herself. It's just that in Xia Panxiu's opinion, this operation is no better than talking to herself. Xia Panxiu looked back at the screen, shook her head gently, and then whispered. How pitiful. What she doesn't know is. Two people have also commented on Chen Lusi's lifestyle before. Lin Ying's evaluation is reassuring. And her sister's evaluation is that he lives better than any dog on the road. On the other side, Chen Lusi was unaware that the petite girl who had met once gave her a pitiful evaluation. Even if he knew, he wouldn't care. Because for him, there is no distinction between good and bad. 1 o'clock in the morning. Chen Lusi went to bed on time. Usually not on time, but with the humanoid sleeping pills, it became easier. Thank you. When the little girl's cold little hand covered her forehead again, Chen Lusi said thank you. As expected, there was no response. But Chen Lusi found that she had a little crush on this little girl. Although there are still many inconveniences. Zhaozhuyuan.com. However, the idea has reached this point. Chen Lusi was unable to continue thinking. Because in the next moment, he fell into a deep sleep and fell into an abyss called sleep. And this time, he had a dream. I dreamed that I was back in the rain 2 days ago. This time, not only were there girls wearing white dresses, but also a wheelchair, a man with a clock head, and a shadow. They surrounded Chen Lusi, who was on the brink of death, as if bidding their final farewell. Immediately after, a piercing buzzing sound sounded. Mixed with unclear whispers. The buzzing grew louder and louder until it reached an unbearable level. Chen Lusi woke up. He looked at the ceiling and immediately wanted to recall the details of his dream. But memories are like the urge to urinate when waking up, and soon after waking up, they disappear like a flood. I can't remember. Chen Lusi rubbed her temples, lazy to think, picked up her phone, glanced at the time, sat up, and instinctively searched for the figure of the little girl. But the little girl who would sit in a chair and stare at the screen the other day is not here today. Chen Lusi glanced at the chair not far away, thought for a moment, got up from bed, went to the bathroom, and went to the balcony. Even opened the wardrobe and refrigerator to take a look. The entire room is only a few dozen square meters. In less than 5 minutes, Chen Lusi completed the search. No one was found. Chen Lusi gently closed the wardrobe, then leaned against it. After a long silence, she yawned and turned to walk into the bathroom. I still have to go outside today. Let's wash our face first. Chapter 9. Explanation. You are listening at unfold.Audio. April 8. 9:30 a.m. Chen Lusi finished washing up, changed into a new set of clothes, and then went out to take a ride to Pengcheng. The city of Jiangchang where he is located is not far from that super first-tier city. To some extent, it can even be said that it is adjacent. In the past, it was only a 2-hour drive at best. That's also why he didn't choose to leave yesterday. There was nothing to say along the way. After 11 o'clock, Chen Lusi arrived at Pengcheng and took a taxi to the building mentioned by Xia Panqiu before 12 o'clock. That is a relatively famous office building nearby. However, today is a workday, and 12 o'clock happens to be the lunch break time for most companies. So, with people coming and going, almost all the elevators in the building are operating under overload. Chen Lusi waited downstairs for a long time and was slightly late when he arrived at the top floor. It's already 12:04. There is a company on the top floor, listed as Tiance Trading. Chen Lusi arrived at the front desk. There stood a girl who glanced at Chen Lusi and asked weakly, "May I ask if you are?" Chen Lu thought for a moment and replied. "Chen Lusi, Miss Xia Panqiu asked me to come." "Oh, I understand. Please go inside and turn left until you reach the end to find the conference room." The girl stretched her voice and showed a sudden realization, then pointed the way to Chen Lusi. Chen Lusi said thank you and turned around to enter the internal workings of the company. But it's the company. There is no one inside at all. It is extremely abnormal for a trading company to be so empty, even during a lunch break. Chen Lusi observed the environment while moving forward and quickly found the conference room mentioned by the receptionist. Gently knocked on the door. "Please come in." Chen Lusi pushed the door open and walked in, recognizing Xia Punqiu at first glance. He stood at the forefront of the conference table, and compared to the casual first meeting, she looked much more formal this time. This formality is mainly reflected in dress. She wore an OL outfit. However, in Chen Lusi's opinion, he is not very suitable for this outfit. Her petite figure wearing OL clothing even gives people a feeling of intentionally pretending to be mature. Besides Xia Punqiu, an acquaintance, there are also over a dozen people in the office that Chen Lusi doesn't know. There are old and young. There are young people who appear to be his age, as well as uncles whose hairlines have receded to the back of their heads. Their attire, attitude, and expressions are all different. But this will all be looking at Chen Lusi. "Sorry for being late." Chen Lusi swept around the conference room and apologized. Xia Punqiu couldn't see clearly whether she was happy or angry, so she nodded and said, "Please sit down." Chen Lusi glanced at the conference room again and then found a chair at the end of the conference table to sit down. And it seems that he is the only one who is late. He just sat down. Xia Punqiu on the front seat clapped her hands, caught everyone's attention, cleared her throat, and said, "Okay, now that everyone is here, let's start. However, there is a premise that I must first tell you, which is, you are human, although you are special, you are still human. It's not a natural choice, it's not a freak, you're just a bit unlucky ordinary people. Simply put, it is the victim. Please remember this sentence, except for some people who have joined Tiance Prefecture and Kunlun, please continue to live as a normal person. Put aside your bold ideas. We have a comprehensive criminal investigation process tailored to your needs. This is the premise of everything. The reason why you are here, and the reason why I am explaining it to you, is not to make you cultivate immortality and become some kind of superhero, or to pursue any kind of power. I just want to tell you what you have encountered and what has happened in the world, so that you have a clear understanding in your heart, rather than just daydreaming and becoming obsessed. After all, whether it's superpowers or emotions, it's better to be clear than to make people guess. Communication is the most primitive and simple process of communication between people. Xia Punqiu skillfully spoke the opening remarks. And most of the people below the stage have different expressions. Xia Punqiu took a panoramic view of everyone's faces and quickly reassessed everyone's level of danger. Although the process may sound lengthy, but in reality, only a few seconds have passed. Xia Punqiu paused for a moment and quickly continued, "So, let's start. I know you've encountered some strange things, so first of all, let me give you a definition of various strange abilities. We call it authority, originating from various legends. As for what legend it comes from, I can tell you directly, I don't know. Because it's too complicated. In addition to the well-known mythological stories, I believe everyone has heard some folk legends about strange and chaotic gods from childhood to adulthood. And this is the source of your abilities. Spiritual resurrection, mysterious resurrection. In short, this is the concept that some kind of energy makes the virtual creatures pointed to in these folklore active, they become some kind of abnormality, attach themselves to you, and you become awakened and gain some of their power, which is what I just said about power. Xia Punqiu didn't continue to observe the reactions of others, but took a sip of water and continued. I gave an example, the most common gratitude legend in various regions. This type of story follows the same pattern. In short, it is a story where someone saves a creature that is not human anyway, and then the other person turns into a human to repay the kindness. Have you heard of all the girls who have become ordinary? This is also a situation that we often encounter. These legends have very little activity, and the authority they give is usually a transformation without much threat. Of course, this is a common situation. In fact, there is a probability of misalignment in the process of granting authority, which is also known as misalignment of authority. Simply put, it means that the host has a strong desire for a certain directional ability, and the legend of activation happens to have relevant descriptions, such as in the rural legend of gratitude. In addition to transformation, there are descriptions of infinite power. Then the power may be misaligned. That's also why I can't explain the source of your power clearly, because it's too complicated. This situation is not uncommon. Do you know what the most authority I have encountered so far? It's invisibility and infinite power. There is a group of people present with invisible authority. I don't even know what you're thinking. However, this kind of power misalignment is not a universal wishing machine. After all, the scale of legend dissemination lies there, and the nature lies there. In general, even if the host has extremely strong emotions and obtains the desired authority without knowing it, the power is not much stronger. For example, invisibility usually lasts for only 7 or 8 seconds. The force is infinite, possibly slightly greater than that of an ordinary person. The third type of contact in most regions can only reach the limit of authority and ability, which is C. Speaking of which, Xia Punxiu hesitated for a moment before saying, speaking of contact, let me mention by the way that we divide all the virtual creatures pointed to in the legend into 3 levels of activation. The first type of contact refers to the legitimate deities that can be traced back to the source scripture. Some people specialize in this area and look for the book garden www.zhaozhuyuan.com as a precaution, but few people take it too seriously because it has been passed down for so long. Multiple ethnic groups have merged multiple times, and after the interpretation of countless officials and civilians from several dynasties, the positions and powers of these deities are extremely chaotic. Before truly encountering the gods, no one can guarantee their duties and authority, nor can anyone know what they are facing. The earliest power dislocation actually refers to their power dislocation. The second type of contact is based on the former, which is different from the former and does not belong to orthodox secondary creation. Alternatively, it is related to certain well-known figures and widely spread legends. The third type of contact is the small-scale dissemination of rural legends. The vast majority of people I encounter are of the third category. I have only encountered the second type once. As for the first type, I have never encountered it before. Tiance has been established for so many years and has not encountered it a few times. So Kunlun has come to the conclusion that compared to rural legends, the first and second types of legends require longer and more difficult time to activate. Looking down at the thoughtful crowd below, Xia Punxiu suddenly changed her tone and said, "All right, don't think about it. I'm not saying these things to make you remember. But I want you to know that your abilities are actually quite useless. Especially here in the south, where you haven't even reached the border of the Central Plains. So don't think about being different, whether it's invisibility or immense strength. If you really have to deal with it, it's just a matter of firing a bullet. All of you present here are victims of the third type of contact. No matter what abilities you have gained, you are not enough in front of modern weapons. I hope everyone has self-awareness about this." Chapter 10. Making Money. You are listening at unfold.Audio. Xia Punxiu's words have just finished. There were a few people below who showed a flirtatious expression. But she seemed to be used to it and didn't pay much attention, just continued to explain. The latter half of the paragraph explains. For most people present, it's a bit boring. Xia Punxiu mainly explains how to define the difference between active trigger authority and passive trigger authority, as well as the handling plans for various situations, various precautions, and examples of unlucky people being caught. In summary, it means don't think about superpowers, don't have any bold ideas, just live like an ordinary person. Be diligent and attentive. I almost didn't put shackles on everyone's feet. And this explanation lasted the longest, almost 2 hours. However, Chen Lusi in the back row finds it quite interesting. The main reason is that Xia Punxiu has a great talent for storytelling, and various exaggerated descriptions such as shooting on the spot are combined with her petite figure and slightly young cute face, creating a kind of cute contrast. And when Xia Panqiu heard for the third time that she had caught a superpower, who attempted to use her abilities to make money and wished to shoot the other person on the spot, Xia Panqiu finally stopped to explain. "Alright, that's all for now. Do you have any further questions?" The people below looked at each other in confusion. Then various strange problems emerged. And soon, someone asked about the topic of following someone. It seems that not only Chen Lusi is troubled. Many people actually feel uneasy about having an extra shadow on themselves. And Xia Panqiu also gave the answer to this. There is no way to solve it, not at this stage, you can only coexist with them. But rest assured, they have no thoughts, just like shadows. At the beginning, such situations would be more frequent and even carry a certain degree of danger. But after their successful boarding, they will not harm the host. And they will gradually decrease their frequency of appearance over time until they disappear. According to Kunlun's conclusion, it is because the legend of activation is also time-limited. As soon as she spoke these words, many people breathed a sigh of relief. Then this batch can also be considered exposed. The questioning session lasted another half hour. Until the end, no one spoke again. Okay, that's it then. Xia Panqiu waited for a while and found that no one had any questions. She clapped her hands again and said, "The person who was supposed to join Tiance should stay. Let the others leave, but before we leave, there's one more thing. You need to go to the front desk to take a fingerprint, verbally describe your abilities, and leave your phone address. In short, the front desk will tell you the specific matters, and you can go directly to the front desk. Finally, as the saying goes, please live a peaceful life. After 6 months, when your authority disappears, you can completely forget about this matter. Please go back." She left a meaningful last sentence behind. Then he arrived at the door of the conference room and opened it. Everyone looked at each other for a moment and stood up one after another. Chen Lusi was also among them, hanging at the end of the team, thinking about the shooting story just told by Xia Panqiu, while following the crowd out. "But as I approached the door, I had just planned to go out. He was pulled down. What are you doing?" Xia Panqiu looked at him. "Making money." Chen Lusi instinctively replied. Xia Panqiu was confused, and then her face suddenly turned black. "No, go home." Chen Lusi reacted and apologized, "I was just thinking about the story you told." "You said it with a bald mouth. You stay." Xia Panqiu stared fixedly at Chen Lusi, and after a long time, turned around and pointed to the vacant space in the conference room. Chen Lusi looked at the crowd walking outside, then at Xia Panqiu's expression, and sat back helplessly. And besides him, there was also a man left behind. He looks in his 20s, with 1 inch of hair and a delicate appearance. After Chen Lusi sat down, he naturally smiled and said, "Hello, my name is Li Tian." "Hello. Chen Lusi." Chen Lusi nodded and also announced his name. "You have a handsome ponytail, how long did you keep it?" Li Tian looked at Chen Lusi, who had a ponytail tied in front of him and looked quite artistic. Chen Lusi was just about to answer. But Xia Panqiu interrupted him. He closed the door and stood back in front of the conference table, saying, "All right, basically, you should have a specific concept of your own experiences. So what I want to talk about next is the other side of the matter. You were all appointed by I to join the Tiance prefecture, and I will tell you about this part. If you don't want to join, you can." Chen Lusi slowly stood up. "You can't do it." Xia Panqiu stared at him and cut off the railway, saying, "Even if your ability is in the 3rd type of authority, it is a rare type that can directly cause damage. This type is not within the scope of free-range observation. I need you to appear in my sight, and you just said you want to make money. Do you really believe it?" Chen Lusi chuckled. Xia Panqiu shook her head and said with a stern expression, "Believe it or not, you can't leave anyway." Chen Lusi roughly understood. This Xia Panqiu has a great opinion of herself. As for the reason he doesn't know. In this situation, he can only sit down. Li Tian naturally said, "I am willing to join." Xia Panqiu was very satisfied with Li Tian's attitude. She withdrew her gaze from Chen Lusi and continued, "The so-called other side refers to the parts that I just omitted and didn't mention. They don't need to know, but you need to know. That is. It is said that activation is not necessarily harmless, even if it is a third type of contact. According to legend, it is possible to affect ordinary people besides the host. The real situation is much more complex than what I just said." Xia Panqiu sighed and said, "For example, some legends about revitalizing can harm people. Whether or not the legend itself comes with some related descriptions, it is a fact that it can endanger the lives of others. For example, not all hosts can maintain autonomous consciousness, it may not be boarding, but rather taking away. And even more importantly, some hosts may already be abnormal and may not live an honest life. They will go from being victims directly to being perpetrators. Another thing is that after being boarded, there will be a brief period of fit, during which the boarder may have a brief chance of losing control, such as using knives or chopping people, which is not uncommon. Speaking of which." She glanced at Chen Lusi. Chen Lusi pretended not to notice. Xia Panqiu gave him a deep glance, withdrew her gaze, and continued, "Plus, legends from all over the world also have strong ghostly colors. In short, the situation in reality is very complex. And Tiance Prefecture is an organization dedicated to handling such matters. Don't ask why it's called Tiance Mansion, I don't know either, and there aren't many people inside who know. You just need to know that we are an organization specialized in handling this situation. Running around, killing out-of-control boarders, guiding non-out-of-control boarders, and dealing with various complex situations is our job. So joining Tiance means that you must bear a certain level of life danger. I must make it clear to you beforehand." "I understand." It was still Li Tian who reacted first. He responded with a nod, "I'll join." "Are you sure?" Xia Panqiu asked again. "Sure," Li Tian replied firmly. Xia Panqiu nodded to him with satisfaction, but as for Chen Lusi, she didn't ask. Afterwards, he didn't say anything further, but left a message to wait a moment before leaving. A few minutes later, he returned and handed the two newly printed documents that were still warm to Chen Lusi and Li Tian. When handing it to Chen Lusi, she hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still gave it. Chen Lusi lowered her head and flipped through the materials, then raised her head and asked, "What is this?" "The method of cultivating immortality. Or more precisely, find another power at the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Xia Panqiu explained expressionlessly, "The authority granted is basically unchanging. This also limits the scope of most powers application. In order to increase the survival probability of members of the Tiance Mansion, you have the information in your hands. This is also the part that I didn't mention earlier, and you should have noticed that besides the authority granted, you also have another ability. That is the ability to sense the spirit in the air that makes the legend alive. And this information is to teach you how to absorb spirits in the air and transform them into various self-protection techniques. As for why it's called cultivation of immortals. Because the process is similar, and practicing it until the end really feels like that. But I also need to tell you in advance." Xia Panqiu's face showed a hint of smile as she whispered, "By practicing this, we are further away from the category of normal humans. Most ordinary hospitals cannot go because blood will turn blue. Consider yourself whether or not to practice, but I still suggest that you practice for the sake of your own life. But don't spread it out. Also, Don't use it for anything else, I'll watch over you. Especially you. Finally. Xia Punqiu looked at Chen Lusi again and gave a special warning. Chen Lusi was a bit puzzled. He still couldn't understand the reason why Xia Punqiu had such a big opinion of him. Finally, he can only blame it on his eyesight. Just like some people are naturally not very good at dealing with. Xia Punqiu may not be satisfied with herself.